Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Dave Chappelle did this interview with NPR. This was kind of randomly hit, and it's doing the rounds. Lots of clips going around from this because he's addressed some hot button issues, the Riyadh Comedy Festival, as well as his history of making trans jokes, and how he feels that Republicans picked up on what he was doing with the trans jokes, but in a much more weaponized and targeted way. So he's getting a lot of shit for this. He did not apologize for any comments that he's made. He didn't show any sense of contrition, like I feel like I did something wrong, but rather he's just kind of complaining along the same lines that he has been complaining. He's very egotistical these days, very self-centered, self-focused, still definitely capable of saying interesting and profound things, but often, for me, it just gets lost in this muddled sort of self-focused message. And this interview is decent. It's being done by NPR because, interestingly, Chappelle is funding an NPR station in his hometown, Yellow Springs, Ohio, and that's who's doing this interview. And so it's a little bit of a softball interview, although she asks some tough questions. She presses him a little bit about some of the tougher stuff, but also it's a pretty friendly interview. She's very charitable and helping him flesh out his perspective rather than poking him too hard. So it's just an interesting dynamic because she even asks him early on in the conversation, are you gonna one day stop funding this station because all of a sudden it's inconvenient for you? Is that how are you gonna play it like how the rest of these rich guys are playing it? And he says that he won't, but clearly that dynamic sets the table for this conversation a little bit. So here is when they talked about the Riyadh Comedy Festival, and he also talked a little bit about the first time that he performed a show in the Middle East, and I thought that was interesting as a contrast to what supposedly happened in this most recent trip to Riyadh. So here is that.
Okay. Yeah.
The first time I can remember doing a big show in the Middle East, man, the thing that was remarkable was the crowd reaction. Right before I went on stage, it's actually funny. Right before I went on stage, they gave me a list of all the things I wasn't supposed to address. It was like right before I went on stage. So I took the list on stage, and that was the show. I just did the list. Don't talk about the royal family. Is that y'all? And I just made fun of them. Man, they were screaming. Ah.
You think you're creating space for them that wouldn't exist?
At the very least, and this is not nothing, that must have felt incredibly cathartic if you can't say everything you want to say, but you see somebody model that behavior. Oh man, you're gonna want it.
The intelligence, U.S. intelligence did make it clear that they believe that the Saudis killed Jamal Khashoggi in the embassy in Turkey, and you knew that when you went, right?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I should tell you.
You had no qualms?
I won't say that. They asked me to go years before that, and I said no for that very reason. Since that time, the United States government does business with the Saudis. Netflix does business with the Saudis. Everyone, the Saudis finance tons of movies. All these, I know, I see them financing boxing matches and all these things. And none of these things were an issue until I went there. And why is that? As soon as a black man can make money off the plantation, they try to tell you that the money is dirty. Well, okay, I'll go home and spend the money with actual slave owners on it. Where is this clean money you're talking
But you
about?
said you hesitated for years to go. There are years you didn't go. So what made the difference for you?
Time and circumstance, time and the wheels of commerce kept turning. You know, if you want to be that pure about money, then stop driving your car, stop eating, don't use your cell phone. Everything is tethered to something that's just terrible. And I can make a million excuses or reasons to deprive that crowd of that show. But man, when I was standing in front of them, I feel like I did the right thing. Our governments are going to ruin everything for us. We'll never get to know each other if we just do everything that they want to do or function on the terms that they want us to function.
All right, so the most interesting thing about this to me is how, in Dave's mind, this whole controversy was about him. And his narrative on it is like, oh, as soon as a black man goes to Saudi Arabia and wants to do business with them, all of a sudden that's a problem, which is a very, very self-focused framing of this, because many comedians, pretty much everybody on the bill, got shit for this. I'm sure that there are some who got away with less scrutiny than they deserved, but for the most part, everybody got shit over it. Everybody had something to say over it, and really, he's not even one of the ones who got the most shit. I would say Bill Burr has gotten more pressure over this than anyone because of how much he lashed back at people who were upset at him. And really, I mean, that's been constant chatter going on surrounding him and some of these other guys who went. And Dave Chappelle, I feel like, has ducked that a lot more. So it's interesting that he truly views that about like himself. It's another instance of the media or the public at large being incredibly uncharitable to him. And so that is the common thread of how he seems to feel about all of this stuff. He feels misunderstood. He feels like he's incredibly talented and one of one and able to articulate himself and do something on stage that is particularly culturally valuable and poignant in a way that nobody else can do. And yet he also is perpetually misunderstood. His words are perpetually twisted and misused and weaponized. And I will say that there's a couple of these comedians that have made this argument about bringing comedy to their culture and opening that doorway, even if it's not like, you know, bringing it to the peasantry or the working class. These are pretty well-off people who are able to afford these shows. But I will say that the way Dave articulates this idea of modeling the behavior of saying things, knowing you're not supposed to say them, or knowing that somebody told you you're not supposed to say them, is a very valuable thing for a lot of people in a culture to see and to make that something that they see and want for themselves. I would say he's put that argument more persuasively than I've heard it from some of these other people like Louis C.K. But it also is interesting that he tells this story about saying everything he's not supposed to say at a separate show. To be clear, he's talking about an earlier show that he did at an event in the Middle East, not this Riyadh Comedy Festival. And so that really is the source of the whole controversy. It's not about Dave Chappelle. And I think a lot of these comedians, in their response to this controversy, have completely missed the mark in terms of what it's about. It really comes down to the fact that, first of all, you're taking money from this regime that actively is being called upon by Human Rights Watch and other human rights organizations. That is the context that they went over there and did those performances in, especially given that this was a show put on by the Saudi Arabian government in order to open the door to a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry that they want to create in Riyadh. So that is for the government of Saudi Arabia. That's the purpose of what they're doing. They have no interest in bringing comedy as a culture to their people and free speech as a concept. That, if anything, is an inconvenient side effect for them wanting to legitimize themselves more on the commercial front when it comes to entertainment. And so the fact that these comedians specifically agreed not to joke about certain things, which is what Dave is saying here, is a value as a comedian, to be given a list of things you're not allowed to talk about and to talk about those things anyway. That's really the source of this controversy, is that you're helping sanitize and legitimize this entertainment project that really is not promoting free speech, and you are compromising your own free speech in order to legitimize that project. Why? For money. And Dave Chappelle touches on that a little bit when he talks about America's deep financial ties with Saudi Arabia and how all of these entities, especially the most wealthy ones in America, are doing business with Saudi Arabia. Those type of relations are not exactly new, but it's very bizarre how he frames it as like, oh, once a black man goes and makes money off the plantation, all of a sudden it's dirty money. No, that's dirty money. You make a lot of money that people don't really criticize. People even didn't really criticize you that much for the money that you made with your trans jokes and all the specials that you've done about that. I mean, I'm sure there are some comments to that effect, but I don't think people would consider that as much dirty money as what you did in Saudi Arabia, specifically because of the fact that you went overseas to help them legitimize a project. Every single one of these comedians has completely ignored that point. Not a single one of them has addressed the fact that this was to legitimize an entertainment apparatus in Saudi Arabia that is going to exist simultaneously with their torturing, disappearing, and murdering of journalists, as well as others in entertainment who speak out against the regime. That's the contradiction of what they're doing. So it is a real thing. It's not just made up internet backlash. I can understand feeling like it's a little out of nowhere, or that it's overblown, or that it's not the first time a show like this has happened. Comedians do shows in Israel. But I do think the specific context of this is worth considering. And ultimately, what Dave's answer comes down to is they offered me money and I wanted to take the money, so fuck you. And the truth is, he has avoided a lot of criticism in a way that his other counterparts have not by taking that attitude. Like, if that's your attitude, that's your attitude. I took the money. I'm not necessarily taking the high ground about it. It is what it is. And I think the reason someone like Bill Burr is struggling so much to get back on the right side of the narrative is because he responded too much to the backlash because he wanted to be on the right side of it. And I think a lot of people were disappointed by the fact that he was taking a strong stance against like oligarchs, the ultra wealthy, tap dancing for people in power, because once you get to a certain point in prominence, you don't have to do that anymore. And so people all of a sudden feel like all of these comedians are willing to just go and tap dance for the Saudi Arabian royal family. Where the hell does that even come from? It's weird. It's weird. So moving on to the comments about trans people, and this has been the one that has been getting the rounds the most, because essentially what he says here is that he feels like the Republican Party weaponized some of the same stuff that he was saying about trans people, the same jokes that he was making about trans people, in a way that he thought was distasteful or just hatred. And it's really bizarre because honestly, if he felt like he didn't have any culpability in that, then he could just view them as completely separate things. No, I have my jokes over here about trans people. It has nothing to do with what those guys are doing. I can't recall an instance of right-wingers using the specific words of Dave Chappelle in some kind of political, organized way, although I'm sure there are instances of that happening, so maybe that's what he's referring to. But here's him first talking about his thoughts on the whole punching down thing in general, which he has said before, and then he gets into how he feels like the culture has shifted a little bit around some of this stuff. And of course, everybody else is so much more dishonest about it than he is.
But what about people who feel like you're punching down? Like you are not a trans person. And there are people who feel like it's different when you are part of the group that has been attacked, hurt, demeaned, etc. And then if you're outside of that group and you're having commentary about it, it causes feelings. And what do you say to people who feel that in some occasions you're punching down?
Well, okay, this is a conversation that
You're bored by, sick of.
I'm not sick of it. I don't want to be dismissive to that sentiment, but I don't know. That's a tough one for me because so much of that was a media phenomenon. What was happening in actual life versus how the media was reporting on my show. And I feel like the way they reported on that show was rage baiting to some degree.
For a purpose, which is to
It's almost, well, some clicks, reporting whatever. Was as if, they almost reported on it as if I was doing something other than a comedy show. I could go on and on about this, but I gotta be
interesting.
careful.
So in a way, like you're saying, look, I'm a comedian, everybody knows that I'm a comedian, so if you don't like my humor, don't buy a ticket.
Reading a joke is a lot different than sitting in a room and hearing it. And part of the sitting in the room part of one of the reasons comedy works is because everyone that bought a ticket, clearly they want it to work. They want to have a good time. They want to have fun. But if you're a person that is very angry or passionate about something and you're afraid that you're going to be misrepresented or misconstrued, and you feel like you have to police comedy to get your point across, you should assess your point. They were doing a weaponized version of what I was doing. I didn't. It's not what I was doing. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
This is before I learned the phrase "I respectfully decline," and I was on Capitol Hill, and everybody ran up to take pictures with me from every congressional office, and I just take pictures with whoever asked. I didn't ask how they voted, what their voting record is. And everyone at first was like CBC people, and then here comes Lauren Boebert, And she said, can I get a picture? And I'd already taken 40 pictures. I didn't want to say no in front of everybody. But I didn't know the phrase. I respectfully declined. So I just took the picture. And then she posted a picture before I could even get from there to the show and says something to the effect of, just two people that knew that it's just two genders. She instantly like weaponized it or politicized it. So I got to the arena and I lit her ass up for doing that. And she should never do that, person like me.
Now she knows what's up.
Yeah, you do whatever the fuck you're doing. Excuse my language. You do whatever it is you do, but don't get me out of the splash zone of your.
Some people think the president's funny. I mean, I've had people say this to me. Like I've interviewed people to say, "Well, what do you like about him?" They say he's funny. Do you think he's funny?
Maybe if he wasn't president, I think that was funny.
All right, so he is going to get clowned for this, and rightfully so. Specifically because of this whole thing with Lauren Boebert and how she ran up to him, got a picture. I remember when this happened. She got a picture with him and then made some transphobic caption, essentially saying like, yeah, we're on the same side. So he says she weaponized that. But the truth is you did all the work for her. And the question shouldn't be, why would she do that? She shouldn't do that to a person like me. Dave loves to say stuff like that. She shouldn't do that to a person like me. Instead of saying, where did I go wrong that I said something that this person thinks I'm in their camp? Because even in the case of the Chappelle show, where he actively stepped away from that because he felt like part of what he was doing was fueling racism or playing off of racist tropes in a way that people who don't come from the same background and perspective that he comes from were thinking that he was justifying their racism. But even in that instance, it wasn't to the level that it was being used as like a front for political projects, and the jokes that Dave Chappelle was making about race were being used as a case against certain people of certain racial groups in Congress. That's exactly what has happened culturally when it comes to the issue of trans people. And I don't know that there are that many figures that are more responsible for that than Dave Chappelle. I mean, you got J.K. Rowling, and I don't think anybody is particularly responsible for that. Also, Donald Trump himself bears more responsibility than anybody for sure. And look, speech is speech, jokes are jokes. I get it. I understand the perspective that Chappelle was coming from when he felt like, oh, they're all coming after me saying this is the one thing I can't talk about, so that's the one thing I'm going to talk about. And you know what? There's enough to say that I could talk about this for a whole hour on stage, so that's actually what I'm gonna do. So I understand that. I think a lot of those jokes were trash. I think he made some points in the course of that. I increasingly feel like Dave Chappelle is sloppy and drunk on stage and nowhere near as profound as he thinks he is. But the point being that it was enormously impactful, regardless of whatever you think the content, how quality it was, because he normalized a view of trans people that is now mainstream. It's impossible not to view it that way. What Dave Chappelle was saying about trans people many years back is now the mainstream, especially the conservative mainstream view. And at the time, what he said that he was doing or was trying to point out was that he felt like he was sort of being coerced into publicly supporting this group and this set of rights that didn't really have anything to do with himself, and the black community he felt was being swept under the rug and their causes for something that he viewed to be like a more privileged cause, because somebody like Bruce Jenner can transition into being Caitlyn Jenner and all of a sudden be a minority when before she was a straight white man. That was a big thing that he focused on in that special about trans people. And the truth is now we have gotten to a point where, like I said, a lot of those ideas about trans people, ways of talking about trans people, have kind of unfolded into society, and all we're getting is a slide back in the rights of people to access that kind of care, whether it's kids in many states, kids who would have access to gender dysphoria evaluations and gender affirming care if they meet that criteria, not surgeries but medications, or adults who want gender affirming care. In many states, their ability to do so is being attacked. And this is on the back of rhetoric from people like Dave Chappelle. He's doing the work of bigots for them, because they have trouble articulating why these sort of hateful agendas, why people's rights should be rolled back, essentially. But if you have comedians who are willing to go out there and convince many, many people to not take the plight or the rights of these people very seriously, then you have a much easier time rolling back those rights, especially an incredibly marginalized group of people like trans people. There's no doubting the history of oppression of black people in America, and many times Dave Chappelle makes very good points in regards to that fact. But also he, I believe, has redirected a lot of hatred towards trans people, and it doesn't really seem like that bothers him, but it does seem like the way that the world views him because of that does bother him. And a lot of these comedians are struggling with that now because they fought for their right to say whatever they want and to not have to deal with consequences, not be able to be canceled for something that they said. And that's where we're at now, because if people will still show up and pay for your tickets and want to see you, then you can continue having a career. And the cancel stuff doesn't really affect your ability to do that. It might affect your reputation, or the things you say might associate you with political movements and figures who are saying the same things as you, or perhaps even using the message that you are putting out there opportunistically and cynically, etc. So those type of forces at play is why it's important to have solidarity amongst different groups, oppressed groups, the working class, black people, trans people. We got to have solidarity amongst each other because they are trying to peel back everybody's rights with things like the SAVE Act. It's very clear. It's never been more clear how tied together all of these causes are. And it's also clear that, you know, old self-interested comedians are probably not the ones to point that out for us.
When it comes to Kanye, I'm not seeing any reason to think that his beliefs have shifted even a tiny inch, but it's possible that he's back on this medication that's making him feel like it's less worth it to be the one dedicating his life to Hitler and going and Sieg Heiling and Nazi insignias and all the shit that he was doing.